Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and today we are going to be looking at indie games. So we're going to be doing 4 small reviews of 4 small box games, and all of these are from smaller independent publishers.
And 2 of them are actually located here in the UK, and 2 are from overseas. All of the games were provided to us for review, but the thoughts are all our own. So let's get right to it.
So the first one we are looking at is Swatch Forsaken Isles, and this is designed by Todd, Walsh, and published by Manor games. And we were a little bit on the fence if they are independent because they put out a whole bunch of games. They've been in studio for a little while, but we looked at their website. It says they're independent, and they got a very indie feel to their games, including this one. And this is the 3rd expansion, I believe, to the Swatch series. We haven't played any of the other ones, but it is fully playable on its own. It's just, you wouldn't know it was an expansion. If I wasn't told it was, I would have had no idea that it was.
This is a cooperative game, and it feels like a dungeon crawler. You're not actually going through a dungeon, but you have a row of monsters that you're trying to fight. And you get to play these very different types of characters that have these different abilities. And so you are trying to defeat the monsters. And each round, one of you has to go to camp, you're buying items, you're taking care of some of the things to make everything a little bit easier. And then the rest of you are actually like fighting the bad guys until you come to the big epic fight at the end.
Yeah, and like you say, this definitely feels like an abstract dungeon crawler to me, and I think that's like the purpose of this kind of game, where you've got a line of monsters to fight against. And I think this is like an established style of game. We haven't come across it before. It feels a little bit like Darkest Dungeon, the video game, but it was an interesting style of dungeon crawler for sure. And I like that you've got that one character that you got to choose. So you all roll your dice, and then generally whoever rolls the worst gets sent off to camp to go light the fire a bit more so you can see monsters or help like heal different characters or whatever it might be. So that's an interesting thing to juggle in this.
Yeah, and I really like that you roll your dice at the beginning. So the combat isn't that you roll your dice and see how you did. You know whether you can fight things or not. And because you're spending your dice for your abilities on your cards, it means the low rolls aren't necessarily like a super terrible thing, because you can usually like put it on a card and then just defeat a monster that way as well. So I do like that as well. I think the characters felt pretty different too. We played with all of them, and then I got better with them too when you played with one that you didn't think was very good, and then I got better when I played with it.
Oh yeah, she's just showing off. Yeah, when I had one that wasn't very good and then she played and wrecked shop with it is what happened. But yeah, we understood the characters a lot more as we went along, and they played quite a bit different, and some of them are really like just in your face punchy characters. There's one guy who mixes like friendly animals into the deck of monsters, which is a cool, different thing. There's someone else who messes with the items in the item store, and there's a whole ton of items you can buy in this too. And so that was neat, and they've got their own dice. And components-wise too, like the dice are great. It's cool that the box folds out to become where the camp is, and so you don't have a lot of extra stuff, but the components they have are nice, especially the little wooden circles that show when you've been to camp, and the doom tokens.
Yeah, it's like the engraved circles. They look great. And it's just a lot in this small box. I mean, these are all small boxes, but because the board is part of the box, I think that really helps. And I think one of the other key things too is like the monsters are fun. I love that there's a rocktopus, so they're all like...
Yes, the rocktopus was like our favorite. It's like the weakest monster, so that's part of it, but the name is so great. Yeah, that was, I think, both of our favorite monster in the game.
Yeah, and I would imagine it's probably specific to Forsaken Isles because it's like a water theme, but...
Right, and like Manor.
Oh, interesting.
Kind of thing that it fits together. And there are 2 ways to play it as well. So there's the usual way where you play 9 rounds, and then there's another way where you fight this Kraken, and that's a 5-round game, so everyone goes to camp once. And we like that one quite a bit more. That plays in like 45 minutes. The longer one, the box says 60. We found it took us like more like 90-ish. And which felt a little long for us. But I think if you want more of an epic quest and something a little bit harder, I could see some people wanting to do that whole like maybe it doesn't take you 90 minutes. I think it probably will though. That whole like 90-minute big game.
Yeah, but it does feel like an adventure, and with having to go to camp twice too, we were really holding off our strong guys till the very end. And it means you're probably not going to have as many ability powers by the time you get to the end too. But it's good that there are both options, because I can see some people really enjoying the full game, or people like us who prefer it being shorter. And for 2 players, there is an adjustment. Well, you always have to play with 4 characters. So for 2 players, you each get 2 characters. And I think that worked well.
Yeah, I think it's solo that would feel like a bit much to me to play with 4 different, but at 2 that felt totally fine. And obviously at 3 or 4, that's going to be fine as well. But I think of the small box games, this felt like the largest experience in the small box.
Up next is Hideous Abominations by Judson Cohen, who is both the designer and the illustrator. And it's the same person who recently launched the Kickstarter Deep Regrets, which we covered on our channel.
And full disclosure, we do know Judson a bit. He is from here in Edinburgh. But Hideous Abomination is this game where you are making this like Frankenstein monster. It's a super quick game where you've got a whole bunch of these different cards, like 120 different monster parts. Everyone starts with a torso, and then you're going to be adding parts to that torso. And how you add them, you can just add them however you want. These monsters can be crazy. So they're going to have all sorts of arms and legs and wings and heads, and they do not have to have the like normal human amount of any of those parts. What you're trying to do is there's a bunch of goals that are going to be out. It's going to be stuff like whoever's got the most eyes or the most noses or whatever that is. And you're going to be building your monster towards those different goals. More goals are going to come out as you go. There's also ways that you can swap monster parts, steal monster parts. You can bolt your monster parts on so no one can steal those monsters. And once someone has finished their monster and enough of those goals have come out, you're going to add up and see who won those different monster categories.
Yeah, and I think the key thing for this one is definitely the art, because the monster art is great, and it's all like has to be really clear for the different categories, because that's part of like wanting to score, is having like the same type of monster parts as part of your monster.
Yeah, you want like a color and type of monster.
Yeah.
Like there's like slimy green monsters, or there's some like kind of cute like feathery monsters. You can make monsters that are quite pretty. You can also make monsters that are super, super gross. I think kids would really get into the art for this.
Yeah, but I think the goal part is great, especially that more has to come out, because you might just not be getting the right cards. Like it might be have a lot of teeth, and you might be like, oh shoot, I have no teeth. But then all of a sudden it might be like have the most wings. You're like, oh, conveniently, I happen to have like tons of wings on my monster.
Yeah, it's good because it gives you something to build towards, but then it also, like there's a chance that just the thing that you've naturally built is going to come up as well, and then you're going to get paid off for that. But I like that you're both doing that, like inherent just building my monster to try and kind of make a sensible monster, but then you're also making just these complete nonsense monsters. And I really like how nonsensical you can make them, but just like the imagination of that, of having the monsters. And the game just plays super, super fast.
Yeah, and because you have to have so many gold cards before you finish your monsters, you're naturally just going to be having this like extending monster for the first part of the game, that it could be you have enough goals, but now all of you have like 6 open parts that you still have to cover. And so you do end up with these really great, like weird creatures as well. And I like that it's not too mean. Like you do have the capacity to steal a card from somebody, but then they get like bolts to like bolt their cards down. So it means at least something else isn't going to get stolen next time that they want to keep.
And this is one that I think is going to work well for families or for kids or for new gamers. It's a very, very light game. So it's really just like getting cards and then putting cards where they match. But there's a bit more to it. Like we've had quite a bit of fun with it. We play obviously an awful lot of games, but I think it's going to be the sorts of folks who are happy, you know, either there's a lot of games like this that are either going to work well if you're playing with kids or if you're playing with a few drinks. I don't know why those two things kind of go together. It's like all those ABBA games like Rhino Hero, right? Either you got to be a little bit tipsy or you got to be playing with kids. Probably don't do both. But this is very much that kind of game.
Yeah, or just up for a little bit of silliness, and that is Hideous Abominations. Next up is Swatch by Scott Lowe James. And full disclosure, we do know Scott. Sean has play tested with Scott from back in London. We've gone to conventions with him. So he is a friend of ours.
Yeah, we played games with Scott at people's weddings. So we definitely know Scott, but we still want to talk. We don't want to ignore people just because we know them. So we do want to talk about this game. So what Swatch is, much like the name suggests, is you're making color swatches. So you start off with this card that has 3 kind of families, like complementary color groups of swatches, and you want to get 1 from each. And how you're going to do that is each turn you're going to put your little marker out on one of the cards in a row of cards. You're going to draft that card. You're also drawing a card. Then you're going to play out cards, and those are going to gain you colors. They're going to mix colors, and then you're going to spend a bunch of colors to get swatch cards. And it's a racing game, like a super quick racing game that's got kind of this neat little draft mechanism to it.
Yeah, and it is very much in the name of the paint swatches. I think that's the best bit. And I don't know why paint swatches are so appealing.
Yeah, I know.
It does look great, like just a solid color with a great name as well. So if you like paint swatches, there are aplenty in this game. Also, mechanically, I like the drafting because when you're picking where you put your token, you're considering the card, but you're also considering turn order because the placement of the token, the order at the end of the round, will determine who gets to go first for the next round. So if there's something really good the next round, you might want to make sure that you're going early.
Yeah, and there's a few different kinds of cards in it. So there's cards where you're gonna get paint, there's cards where you're gonna mix paint, there's cards where you're gonna trade with other people, which is kind of the one kind of mean thing, but you have to give them something, you get something. You can still kind of mess with people a bit. But the interesting thing is that because at the end of the game, you've got to get rid of all of your paint, you can't just take all of the color ones that are gonna give you like 6 or 8 or whatever it is at the max of those cubes. You do actually want those smaller number ones as well.
Yeah, it is definitely an efficiency puzzle. And we both ran into that the first game when we just got a ton of paint tokens and mixed them, and we both had like 10 left over at the end. And then we're like, oh great, now we have to try and get rid of these 10. So you were trying to efficiently get exactly the right kind of cubes you want to make the exact colors you want. But that can shift too, because if somebody gets the paint swatch that you've got the right colors for, and then the next one underneath gets revealed, that might have a different ratio. So then you might have to like rethink your plans to try and get the right types of paint for that swatch.
Which is also where that trading can come in as well, where you can steal stuff from other people and give them your stuff. And so you can be stealing for good, or you could be stealing for evil and just like, I know you've got exactly what you want. I'm gonna take that, so that you've gotta figure out another way or be able to take it back from me.
And I will say that because we've played about the same amount of times, we are about the same level, and it's a very tight race. Like our past few games, we have both managed to like get the 3 swatches and only have like 2 or 3 tokens, and it's just whoever can get rid of them first. So that right combination of like mixing the 2 and then getting rid of 1, it could win you the game.
And it works, I think, particularly well at 2. I actually prefer it at 2 than at other player counts because you got 2 things that you're going to put down, so you're drafting 2 cards each round. It just moves just a little bit quicker.
And it looks great. If you really like paint colors, then there's a lot of that in here. The box also looks really nice in a nice small box, and that is Swatch.
Next up is ATW Extreme, and this is a wrestling card game that is designed by Jad Yamin and Mohammed Al-Qadi.
And this is another standalone expansion as well. And we haven't played the base game box, but you don't need it to play this version. And it is very much a wrestling game, but it is like a fighting card game. So you all start with your own individual deck and you play cards which represent wrestling moves. But to play the cards, you've got to spend energy, and then you roll a dice to see if you're successful with your move. But there are ways to mitigate that dice roll. And what you're trying to do is combo your cards and wear your opponent down enough so that you can pin them.
And this is the extreme version of ATW. So they got a bunch of classic ECW wrestlers in here, and they've actually got real wrestlers in here too. So they got Raven, who's one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. They got Rob Van Dam and they've got Sabu, and then they've got their own made-up guy named Demon. And so this has got like a slightly different mechanic than the main mechanic. So it's got all that wrestling stuff, but then it also has an exploding bomb barbed wire match. So if you know the classic like Terry Funk Cactus Jack matches that used to exist, it's that sort of craziness where you're fighting each other with all sorts of weapons, and then the ring's gonna like blow up. So it's a little bit of a different style than the base game.
Yeah, and I will say that I preferred the base game version to the extreme version. Because the extreme version, like you're fighting each other until like the timer gets down to the bottom, and then you can finally like actually pin people. And when you're using the weapons, either of you could get hurt, so it had a little bit of an interesting risk, but it felt too long. I just generally prefer the base game.
I agree. And the cool thing though is that you can play either version of the game. So you can just play the normal game, it's got the normal rules in it, or you can play with all the extra added stuff as well. I totally agree though, the base game just felt a lot smoother to me.
Yeah, although I will say the rule book was a challenge to get through. So once we figured out how to play, it was pretty straightforward. We felt like some of the icons were in the wrong order for how you like resolve the cards, but it wasn't that complicated of a game, but it just took a while for us to wrap our heads around it.
Yeah, the rule book's not doing it any favors at all. Also, the artwork is going to work for some folks. It's got a very comic booky art style, as you can see on the front of the box here as well. But I don't know, some people are gonna really bounce off of it. I could see some people who like kind of more indie-ish, like it's got kind of a 90s indie comic feel to the art.
Yeah, and I will say this is definitely for wrestling fans because we both have watched a lot of wrestling, you more so than me, but even when it came to picking our characters, I didn't know Rob Van Dam, but I knew he was like a high flyer. So I really liked that my cards had like the aerial cards, and I had to try and play a lot of the aerial cards to get my bonus. And that's just like the mechanics wrapped up in the theme, but if you need to connect with the theme.
Yeah, and they do all play like thematically as well. So Sabu's gonna do crazy stuff. Raven's got like a flock, unfortunately, and I understand why they don't have the rights to have like Saturn or Billy Kidman or any of those as well. So they've got kind of made up flock people, which is too bad, but it's fine. And so they all kind of play their own way, and their made up guy as well, Demon. It's interesting, like he looks kind of cool as well. So they do play differently, but I think if I was picking this up, I would definitely look for the original box first, because I know that's got Macho Man, Andre the Giant, British Bulldog, and then a bunch of made-up guys.
Yeah, and if you already have the base game and you think, not enough barbed wire, well, this one does add the barbed wire.
And that is it. So that is 4 small box independent games.
Thank you so much for watching. Please let us know in the comments what your favorite small box from an independent publisher is. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.